How does Chitre stand out? So you kind of describe it as a very small town. Obviously, it's not like a major tourism destination in Panama, maybe yet, or an expat destination. How does it stand out to some of the places that people, OLL readers, might know about in Panama, like, the famous expat spots in the country? Or how is it different?
When I think of famous expat spots in Panama, Panama City and Boquete are probably the first two that come to mind. Boquete being up in Chiriquí province near Costa Rica. And Boquete is really characterized for its large expat population. I believe it's the largest population of expats in the Americas. It's over 25% foreign. So in Boquete, you have a town, a culture that really caters to foreigners, to tourists and expats. The majority of people speak English. You hear more English than Spanish spoken on the street. That's not the case in Chitre. Chitre has about 500 expats to its, the actual town of Chitre has about 9,000 residents. The district itself has about 55,000. So you have 500 people out of 55,000. That's a pretty small population. So the lifestyle is very authentic. If you were to be living in Chitre, you'd be living side by side with locals. You wouldn't have that separation that you might find in Boquete or in certain neighborhoods of Panama City, like the Canal Zone. So you'd be participating in local festivals. You'd be participating in their traditions. You'd really immerse yourself in their culture. And another major difference is that you would definitely need to speak a proficient level of Spanish in Chitre to have a high quality of life, to really thrive. The people there are very friendly and they'll go out of their way to help you, but the majority of the population of the locals there speak a limited level of English. So, and there are Spanish classes on offer there. So you don't have to go speaking, being 100% proficient in Spanish, but just with that willingness to learn. Also, the cost of living. The cost of living in places like Boquete, Panama City is very high, and it's rising more because of the amount of foreigners that move to live in those places every year. Chitre is very possibly the most affordable place to live in Panama City. So I would say that those are another thing that really sticks out about Chitre is how well it's preserved its traditions. It's known as the heartland of Panama, and you go in the region, you still find people working cows on horseback. You find festivals throughout the year, churches and other buildings that still stands from the 1600s. That very traditional Spanish colonial architecture is still very widespread in the region. So I'd say that those are the things that stick out the most about Chitre.
So how does it compare to, say, some of these higher land regions that you just mentioned? And climate-wise, how does it compare to some of the other places in Panama?
It's definitely the hottest and driest place in Panama. The temperatures are regularly in the low 90s, and it has the least amount of humidity in the country. So there's a region so Chitre is down. If you look at a map of Panama, there's a section, a peninsula that sticks down south, and it's kind of boot-shaped. That's the Azuero Peninsula, and that's where Chitre is located in Herrera province. And that is in a region of the country that's known as the Arco Seco, or the dry arch, and it receives the least amount of rainfall of the country. So whereas in Panama City, it'll rain from April until December, pretty much every day. In Chitre, the rainy season also falls in those months, but out of those months, it really only rains a couple. It doesn't rain constantly. And the heat is pretty persistent throughout the year. So it's pretty much a 92 dry heat, I guess, kind of think Arizona, but tropical.
It's really interesting you mentioned Arizona, because it's I saw this statistic where the population of Arizona is exploding because that's where all the retirees in the United States go. And then I saw another number that showed the average cost of housing, I think in Arizona, and it was just something crazy. Definitely much, much higher than you're going to find in this particular town that seems to have a similar climate and a beach, which makes it a little bit different to Arizona. Anyway, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here. You mentioned your real estate contact there. Could you tell us just a little bit about what the accommodation options are? Maybe like what the average expat couple, let's say, would rent if they were interested in spending some time there?
Yeah, so the majority of the properties for sale here on the market are homes. They're high quality used houses that are very affordable. They're typically sold for about the original sale price. So there's not very much capital appreciation going on here. What typically happens is expats move here, and then usually due to age, once they feel that they can't live on their own anymore, they head back to their home country and they sell their houses for cheap. So that's the majority of the houses that are on the market there, that's the case. There are real estate's currently selling for about 35% less and sometimes even more than it was before the pandemic. So I was talking with my real estate contact there, and she told me about a house that was listed at $600,000 before the pandemic that just sold for $300,000. That's a difference of 50%. She recommended 3 different residential communities for expats in Chitre. There's Villas del Golf, which is a residential community that's right next to the golf course, right beside it. And the houses there, I'm going to use the US Southwest comparison again. I have family in Las Vegas, and the residential communities there reminded me a lot, architecture-wise, of the homes that I've seen in places like Las Vegas. So like white stucco with like a red tile roof. She also recommended another residential community that's called Los Guayacanes. So Villas del Golf is a little bit further away from downtown. It's probably a 10-minute drive from downtown Chitre. So very quiet, very peaceful. You don't have a lot of road noise. You don't have, the loud blasting music and, the drunk people shouting in your neighborhood in the middle of the night, as you might have in other places. The other residential community, Los Guayacanes, is a little bit closer to town. It has a community pool, community recreation area. She recommended the neighborhood Miramar as the best neighborhood for families with children because all the houses there have very large yards. So the majority of places on the market there are homes. It is possible to also find apartments and condos, but the majority of what's available are homes. You can choose to live in a residential community. You can choose to live more, in a rural area. You could choose to live beachfront. When I was doing research into real estate there, I found that like a basic but modern home in Villas del Golf costs about $155,000. I found another new modern home with a patio and a barbecue area 5 minutes from downtown for $220,000. I also found a really large 2-story, 6,300 square foot home in a more rural area, very large yard for $390,000. So that kind of gives you an idea. You could find a very elegant home here for between $400,000 and $600,000. With that, you could own a 2-story home beachfront easily.
Amazing. Yeah, that's not something that's available just everywhere in the world, especially not in the comparable places that people think about retiring in the United States. You're not going to be finding beachfront for that amount of money. So that's really incredible. And it does sound like there's a wide variety of options as well, if you want something a little bit different. Okay, so the last couple of things I wanted to talk about was one thing was residency. So we used to always talk about Panama being the easiest place in the world to get residency, but things have changed over the past couple of years. And nowadays it's not as easy as it was. it used to have something called the Friendly Nations visa, where basically you could, if you're from any of a certain number of countries, it's either 50 or 52 or something like that, you could basically just show up in Panama and start the residency process. And it was very straightforward. You basically just need to pay a lawyer to sort that out for you. And you could even get a work permit through that. Then in 2021, that changed a little bit. And I think you got there just before the changes happened, right? Right, Gabrielle? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good for you. That's great. So nowadays, in addition to the normal requirements, you have to deposit a certain amount of money into a local bank account. You also need to have either made a real estate investment worth at least $200,000. You need a employment letter and contract from a Panamanian business. And you need either one of those things in hand before you can start this process. So things have become a little bit more complicated. And the real estate investment amount, if you do decide to go that way, it's set at $200,000 right now, but things can also change, especially as they assess, the effect of making that change. They might adjust that number and put it even higher in the future. So Panama is no longer as easy as it once was in terms of that type of residency, but it is still very easy in terms of if you're just going there to retire, it's still pretty straightforward. You can get the Pensionado pensioner's visa, which to qualify, you just need to have $1,000 a month in income, either from government or private pension. And it's pretty straightforward to qualify through that. And I know that the Pensionado visa also comes with specific perks in Panama, for instance, discounts on things like hotel stays. I think certain medications, you get to jump the line at the bank or the post office. Do you know of any other benefits to Pensionado, Gabrielle?
So they give you 10 to 50% off of, it's a huge range of different services, products, anything from movie theater tickets to prescription medication, the closing costs on a home, import fees, hotels, flights, buses, like public transportation. Those are the ones that I can think of right off the top of my head right now, but the list is immense. It's very long.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
It is 10 to 50% depending on even meals out at a restaurant, I believe.
Yeah, it seems like a really good program with tons of incentives. So as long as you're not coming to Panama and hoping to find a job, the Pensionado visa could be a really great, straightforward option for you. With a lot of incentives, like we're saying.